What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review. Now, originally I was going to do an album review for a band called Underrot, but I couldn't find an album anywhere, so I decided to do some digging on Metal Archives for anything else that came out over the weekend, and I thought, once I saw this and saw the list of bands that this band was compared to, I'm like, you know what, I think we'll go with this. So I am doing a review for the latest offering from Portuguese death metal band Pestifier, Ravaging Fury. This came out on April 5th on Larva Records, and this is the band's second studio full-length overall. This is my first time checking this band out. And like I said, they are from Portugal, and they are a straight-up death metal band. Well, that's accurate, but I also feel like this is almost like a sampler platter of all things death metal for the most part. Like, this whole album is just bonkers when it comes to the speed and the pacing, the flow, but also you have a lot of really cool old school death metal ideas, occasionally some technical death metal. It even gets brutal at times, even blackened here and there. It's just like a big sampler platter of like the heaviest death metal you could find out of variety of all those subgenres. So we kick things off with Blasphemy Codex, which immediately gets into blast beats, tremolos, and those big like giant squealy dive bombs. But musically it almost feels like a hybrid of Hate Eternal and Vader, because it's so fast, but yet it's also very thrashy, kind of like Vader at their fastest, non-blast beat sections. And it just goes full tilt aggression, and that really kind of set the pace for the majority of the songs on this album to come. Like the following track, Blood Birds of Prey, initially it starts off with like alternating between like a big D beat and blast beats, but you get more machine gun riffs that kind of fit more in line with like a thrashy death metal sound, again very akin to bands like Vader. But then the tremolos that follow along are kind of more blackened death metal, similar to like Behemoth and Hate and Belphegor, kind of like that, but done with a little bit more sickness to them, done with a little more ill intentions behind it. But then it does get into like a big lumbering groove, kind of like Bolt Thrower for a bit, before it just goes back to dive bombs. Now, I will go ahead and comment when it comes down to the lead work. Like initially the first few songs and then a later track, it's mostly like those big Morbid Angel squealy dive bombs or dissonant dive bombs, atonal dive bombs, whatever you want to call it. But as the album progresses, like even on Blasphemy Codex, and then throughout the rest of the album for the most part, the leads start to get less about the dive bombs and more about shred, but they still kind of feel like Triassic 2 leads. Like, it's more in that vein of solos, and there are some Morbid Angel nods that do show up later in the album, whereas in a track like Incumbent Blasphemies, just lots of like nasty crawling riffs that kind of make you think of bands like Incantation, for example. And then Execration Diatribes, this one of the faster songs on the album, which this album is mostly all out speed. This song, I think, kind of stands above most of the rest of the album in terms of the speed, with these blasts and tremolos. Almost feels like a hybrid of Angel Corpse and Chrysian, maybe even Nile. And there are some Nile nods throughout the album in terms of when it gets a little bit more technical and a lot faster, kind of goes into that realm of things. And even a double time stomper comes up on this track. Pyrokinetic Terror, which was, I think, the shortest track of the album. Like, it's maybe 2 minutes, but man, is it a brutal 2 minutes. Like, this is really where the Nile influence really shines. Like, it's kind of technical, but it's also very thrashy in terms of the drum beats. But the blast beats on here kind of remind me of George Callias's blasts a little bit. And it's just unrelenting. Then we get a break in the album. At the middle point, we get the song Christless Dawn, which is an instrumental, but it's a pretty cool instrumental. It's a big guitar slide into like a really cool melodic riff and marching drums, and it's pretty much Nile based. Like, this almost feels like it was plucked out of a Nile album, but changed the guitar tuning, and that's really what this track was. Allure and Inequity. This one does kind of get a little bit more technical death metal, like the guitars get a little more technical, at least at the beginning, before you get like back into fast blasts and tremolos. You even get like trade-offs with the shredding solos and even a gravity blast beat. And then at the Hall of the Impotence, this one I think goes for a little bit more of the old school death metal style, like Cannibal Corpse, but still you get like a big Hate Eternal march, because this song for the most part goes for triplet chugs galore. Like the triplet chugging on this song was awesome, but you still get your blasts, you still get gross riffs that feel more akin to Cannibal Corpse, but it grooves a little bit, which is the only time on the album I would say it grooves at all. Well, apart from the lumbering groove on Blood Birds of Prey. But yeah, later on after the big dive bomb, you get to this like Hate Eternal marching sound, which is pretty cool. But then Sedition and Glorious Arsenry. This is the song where it gets Morbid Angel top to bottom, like the tremolos, the blasts, the thrashy bits feels like old school Morbid Angel, and even in the solo it's a big atonal shredding lead that feels very Trey-esque. And then Vengeance Upon the Plague, MMXX1 or III or 2023 in Roman numerals. This one pretty much feels like an all-encompassing song, and it was maybe the best song on the album because you get your Nile tremolos and blasts, you get your Morbid Angel or Cannibal Corpse triplet chugs, but you even get a little bit of dissonance in here too, and of course the lead feels like Trey again. But one thing that stood out about this song, you get like an isolated bass moment, which brings me to the production. The production on this album I thought was pretty solid, like really good, raw, gritty recording. The mix was pretty solid, even though I wish the bass could have been turned up just a tiny notch so you could hear the bass a little more prominent in the mix. Now, as far as any complaints I have, this album does kind of go into like a just 2 gears, which, man, they play those gears exceptionally well on here. But I perhaps would have loved to have heard like maybe a spot or two of like where they slow it down to almost like a Death Doom moment to kind of break up the ferocity and the speed. But the biggest issue I had was the closer, Ave. It's probably one of the most pointless songs I've heard all year. It's just weird noise and spoken word. I would have just cut that song out of the album and I would have probably given this a 4.5 out of 5. But having that track on here kind of hurts the score a little bit because it was just pointless and needlessly there. That's my biggest issue. But with that said, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. I thought this was awesome, visceral death metal. If you're a fan of Vader, Hate Eternal, Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Nile especially, check this out. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.